Florida's swamps are a little paradise for wildlife. Or more precisely, they used to be a paradise until the Burmese python showed up. A huge number of snakes wiping out local animals one by one. Hope was almost gone. But then a beast comes out that fears not even the deadliest snakes. It could change everything. The question is, whose side is it on? These swamps don't need a hero. An unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video. Invasive snakes in Florida have turned into a problem that people just can't seem to solve. And worst of all, of course, are the Burmese pythons. They've made themselves at home in South Florida, established a stable breeding population there, and have no plans of leaving. Burmese pythons are pushing out native animals, taking away their food and living space. And it's not just mammals. Birds and other reptiles are affected too. And the consequences are already visible to the naked eye. In Everglades National Park, the numbers of many native animals have dropped catastrophically. A 2012 study showed that since 1997, the raccoon population fell by 99.3%, opossums by 98.9%, and bobcats by 87.5%. The remote southern areas where pythons have been around the longest have been hit the hardest. By the most conservative estimates, there are already tens of thousands of them. But the trouble isn't just with Burmese pythons. While they're getting all the attention, other large snakes have made themselves at home in Florida, like green anacondas and boas. They found their place in the Sunshine State too, and are steadily expanding their range. Authorities and scientists have been trying to stop this invasion for years. In 2023, for example, they allocated $3.35 million to step up efforts to wipe out Burmese pythons and other non-native species. But no matter how much effort they put in, no matter how much money they pour in, the situation hardly changes. And yet, the internet has an idea that could change everything. Please welcome the beast that can withstand the venom of deadly snakes. The beast that Guinness World Records calls the most fearless creature on Earth. The beast that won't hesitate to fight a lion or a hyena for food, the honey badger. Can honey badgers be introduced into Florida's Everglades to bring down the Burmese python population? Honey badgers are mammals spread across Africa, Southwest Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. All of that's a world away from Florida, and on the surface, the plan sounds completely insane. Why honey badgers, though? Alright, I guess that question only really comes up if you've never heard of them before. Honey badgers are fierce mammals that people often mistake for badgers. Though in fact they're closer to weasels and other members of the mustelid family, they really do look like a badger, only with a bowl-shaped white stripe running all the way down their back. But behind that peculiar look is a spirit any predator would be proud to have. The honey badger is omnivorous, and it couldn't care less what's in front of it, a plant or an animal, a fresh kill or something that's been lying around, a tiny lizard or an antelope 10 times its size. If it has to fight grown lions for food, it'll fight, and that's the lion's problem. That kind of appetite and diet call for not only power, but smarts as well. Honey badgers are always digging, climbing, squeezing through narrow cracks, and finding their way back out, solving new problems to stay alive. They've got a fairly large brain for their body size, and they're one of the rare non-primates that actually use tools. The honey badger's skin is very tough and sits loosely on its body. This gives the animal a strange advantage. If a predator sinks its teeth into it, the badger can literally twist around inside its own hide and bite back. The long claws on its front paws and strong legs are not just for digging, they're weapons too. These claws, up to 1.6 inches long, can crack open a turtle shell. That's why an inexperienced leopard or hyena may only try to attack a honey badger once. They won't dare a second time. There are stories of 3 honey badgers driving 7 lions away from their kill, or of a honey badger following a trail for miles on end, relentless, until it claimed its prize. In South Africa, they even go after oryxes, huge horned antelopes that outweigh them 10 to 1. For the honey badger, attack has always been the best form of defense. It's no surprise this animal became a real internet star. A YouTube video with the simple caption, "Honey badgers don't care," has already racked up over 100 million views. The honey badger turned into a symbol of fearlessness and persistence, a public favorite, and a meme hero. which is exactly why when the topic of Burmese pythons came up, many thought, who else but the honey badger could handle the invasion? And here's another important factor. Snakes make up about a quarter of the honey badger's diet. And we're not talking about some harmless little grass snakes, but real venomous predators. It's often believed that honey badgers are born immune to their venom, but that's not exactly true. Their resistance builds up gradually. Female honey badgers raise their young for a long time, up to a year and a half, and during this time they put them through a kind of venom school. First showing them scorpions, the weakest ones, then moving on to more dangerous creatures. Only when the cub grows strong enough does it start taking on cobras and vipers. It's believed that generation after generation, honey badgers and their ancestors developed resilience at the molecular level and can now survive what would kill any other creature. Even huge pythons don't seem like unbeatable opponents to them. The African rock python is 3 times heavier than the average honey badger and can weigh up to 198 pounds. It's one of the largest snakes in the world, an experienced hunter capable of crushing its prey in coils. But the honey badger wins not with size, but with ferocity. In 2017, in South Africa's Kruger National Park, a honey badger hunt was caught on camera. It lured a big python out of hiding and didn't hesitate to attack, and won. In these kinds of fights, the honey badger often comes out on top. There are times when a honey badger fights not just a snake, but also competitors. In a safari park in Botswana, a rare scene was caught on camera: a honey badger, a python, and 2 jackals. At first, it looked like the animal was done for. The python coiled around its body and started to squeeze, but then a jackal jumped in, bit the snake, and the honey badger got a chance. It broke free, latched onto the python, and dragged it into the bushes. The second jackal ran at the prey from the other side, but the honey badger wasn't too grateful and didn't share. In short, back in its native Africa, a honey badger not only hunts pythons, but can also steal prey from other predators. Where others steer clear of snakes, it goes on the attack. But what about the snakes it might face in Florida? So honey badgers can handle southern African rock pythons, but Burmese pythons are a whole different story. A rock python usually grows to 9 to 13 feet, with anything over 15 feet being rare. A Burmese python, on the other hand, typically reaches 16 feet. The record holder even made it into the Guinness World Records. In July 2023, a 19-foot specimen was caught in Florida, a monster that could rival an anaconda. So overall, the Burmese python is bigger and more dangerous than the rock python. But there's a catch here too. Snakes aren't born 16 feet long. To reach those giant sizes, they need time and lots of food, which means Florida's home to tens of thousands of smaller pythons, which means they're about the same size as rock pythons, typical opponents for a honey badger. Now let's imagine that honey badgers were actually released in Florida. What could that lead to? In Southeast Asia, where Burmese pythons come from, they have plenty of enemies. Crocodiles, monitor lizards, king cobras, other pythons, tigers. Basically, all sorts of animals hunt them. But in Florida, there's nothing like that. And the pythons are breeding like crazy. Once a python grows big enough, it basically has no real threats. Nothing can seriously harm these snakes, except maybe alligators or the rare American crocodile. And that's exactly why the population has exploded. The honey badger, in theory, could be the missing predator that restores the balance. Moreover, as I've said, the honey badger is omnivorous. Its diet always includes eggs, which means it can take down pythons at any stage of their life. First, it raids nests and eats the eggs. Then it hunts the young snakes. And even when the pythons grow to an age where no one bothers them anymore, the honey badger keeps attacking. Because, well, it's a honey badger. For it, there's no such thing as wrong prey. The habitat won't be a problem either, because honey badgers live just about anywhere: forests, plains, deserts. So Florida's climate, with its swamps, tropical heat, and thick brush, would be right up their alley. Thanks to their adaptability, honey badgers could spread across the entire range of pythons and hunt them wherever they cause trouble. The idea, in general, looks like classic biocontrol. We bring in a born snake hunter, and all those traps, shootings, and endless hunts gradually become a thing of the past. As a result, you can even save some money. Pay once to bring in and release the honey badgers, and there's no need to pour in millions like they do today. Seems like a solution to all problems. But hang on, this idea has some cons too. First off, being omnivorous, which should be a plus. The honey badger is not a narrow specialist in snakes, but a voracious all-rounder. In the wild, it kills and eats up to 60 different animal species, from insects, frogs, turtles, lizards, and rodents, to birds and their eggs. It eats berries, roots, and bulbs too. It tears into every part of its prey: skin, hair, feathers, meat, and bones. Most of its meals are animals over 3.5 ounces. Cobras, young pythons, spring hares. There are even reports of honey badgers attacking sheep and goats and killing black mambas. In India, they say they dig up human graves. Again, just for a bite. No limits. No fuss about what to eat either. And now imagine releasing this living, cunning, clever meat grinder into Florida, a region with more than 80 ecosystems, home to 700 species of land animals, 200 species of freshwater fish, thousands of marine fish species, and countless insects. Many unique plants live here, some of which are threatened with extinction. Scientists have counted over 1,500 plant species endemic to the North American coastal plain, and more than 250 of them are found only in Florida. No wonder this plain was recently named the 36th Global Biodiversity Hotspot. This place is full of tiny animals, and none of them are ready for such a ravenous predator. You can't exactly order honey badgers to only eat Burmese pythons, of course, because they'll eat anything they can get their paws on. What's more, there's a chance they won't even notice the pythons. Why bother with a big, dangerous prey when there's a full-on buffet all around? And that was just the first downside. The second one, the scale of the threat to animals who are already struggling. As I said, Florida's home to a lot of rare species. Along just a 20-mile stretch of the East Coast, sea turtles lay more than 68 tons of eggs. 5 species of turtles nest here, 3 are already considered vulnerable, and 2 are on the brink of extinction. And all those eggs are an easier and safer meal for the honey badger than a dangerous Burmese python. The situation with the American crocodiles isn't much better. They live in the coastal areas of southern Florida, at the northern edge of their range. In 1975, they were listed as an endangered species, and although their population has grown from just a few hundred to around 2,000 adults since then, the species is still at risk. Crocodile eggs, like turtle eggs, are a tasty treat for the honey badger. Besides, unlike pythons, they don't put up a fight. And finally, the third downside. The honey badger in Florida would also become a non-native species without any natural predators. Actually, even in Africa, it doesn't have that many enemies. Sometimes leopards, lions, or hyenas hunt honey badgers, but more often, predators just stay away. The animal is too fierce and small. There's not much meat, and it takes a lot of effort to catch. It's much easier to go after something bigger and calmer. In Florida, the list of potential enemies could include the bobcat, the Florida panther, the Florida black bear, and the alligator. But there are 2 things to note. First, all of them except the alligator are rare. There aren't enough of them to really affect the honey badger population. Second, they'll probably figure out the same thing African lions and hyenas did. It's better not to mess with this animal. Ultimately, we end with an aggressive and ravenous predator, a population of which no one would naturally keep in check. And that's where it becomes obvious. The idea of putting honey badgers in Florida is, to say the least, questionable. But to really make sure it's a terrible idea, let's look at history. History has plenty of examples of biocontrol that turned into biocatastrophe. One of the most famous tragic disasters happened in Hawaii in the late 19th century. Back then, wealthy plantation owners were desperately trying to save their main crop, sugarcane. Rats loved the sweet juice and spent all day gnawing at the stalks, ruining the harvest. And in the 1880s, farmers decided they'd found the perfect solution. They brought mongooses to the islands. The logic was simple. The predators would hunt down the rats and wipe them out on the spot, leaving the cane untouched. But this theory fell apart almost immediately. Rats and mongooses had different schedules. Rats hunted at night, while mongooses were active during the day. They rarely ran into each other, and when they did, rats weren't the main target for the mongooses. Instead, Hawaii's rescuers switched to the local species. Mongooses turned out to be incredibly adaptable and quickly spread across the islands. Controlling their numbers proved difficult. They started hunting small birds and their eggs, sea turtles and insects. Mongooses even ate plants and fruits. Of course, the consequences were catastrophic for the island ecosystems. Today, mongooses are blamed for the disappearance of at least 8 bird species that were found only in Hawaii. The second story is no less famous because it happened in Australia in 1935. Back then, sugarcane plantation owners were also looking for a way to deal with pests, only this time the enemy was beetles eating the cane roots. At the farmers' request, the government released about 2,400 cane toads in northern Queensland. The plan was exactly the same as in Hawaii. The toads would eat the beetles and save the crop. But it all followed the same old story. In Australia, these amphibians didn't have any natural predators, but they found endless food and a very cozy environment. The toads were omnivorous, reproduced easily, and began quickly spreading into new areas. Now their population is already in the millions. Their poison is deadly for local animals and even pets. If an animal tries to touch the toad, bite it, lick it, or swallow it, it could end up dead. On top of that, the toads push out native species, stealing their food and living space. Anyway, we covered this story not long ago, so I won't go over it again. There are plenty of similar stories worldwide. Look at guppies, those colorful aquarium fish. They used to be shipped everywhere to combat malaria. Guppies readily gobble up mosquito eggs. What's not to like? But today, these fish have established themselves in over 60 countries, and they haven't always been harmless. In Mexico, for example, guppies are a threat to native top minnow fish. Another example is the harlequin ladybird, native to Asia. Since the 1910s, it's been widely used as a biocontrol agent against aphids and scale insects. The harlequin ladybird was seen as the perfect generalist, a species that could survive in all sorts of conditions, voracious, adaptable, and able to tackle any pest. And indeed, it proved successful as a control method, but then the side effects started to show. Today, populations of the harlequin ladybird have settled in at least 59 countries outside its native range, from Europe to both Americas. It became a real invader, threatening local species and even agriculture. A quarter of the scientists surveyed openly called this ladybird a potential threat. And finally, a case from aquatic life. Red-bellied tilapia, part of the Cichlidae family, used to be found only in the northern half of Africa and the Middle East. Nowadays, though, it's everywhere. It got around both on purpose and by chance, even being used to tackle water weeds. The problem is that red-bellied tilapia turned out to be greedy and totally unpicky about food. It eats insect pupae, which reduces the biomass that was supposed to feed local fish. And its invasion range is impressive. Southeast Asia, West Asia, Western Australia, islands in the Southern Pacific, the USA, Europe, the Caribbean. Red-bellied tilapia has established itself almost everywhere and started competing with local wildlife for resources. And here the parallel with the honey badger is obvious. Being greedy and omnivorous might not be a plus, but a drawback. If you released a honey badger in Florida, it would turn out to be just like a tilapia on land, or a mongoose, or a ladybug, or even a bit like a cane toad. The main reason for all these ecological disasters is that biocontrol was way too often carried out without proper research and without understanding the collateral issues. The very term biological control sounds nice. It brings up images. A predator keeps a pest in check. Nature restores balance on its own. Humans just give a little nudge, and everyone's happy. But reality has always turned out much darker. There were straight-up disasters caused by ignoring the most basic scientific procedures. Let's take the same cane toads. They were released in Australia by an entomologist, a researcher at a sugar industry science institute, and he did it against the advice of his colleagues. No one checked whether the cane toads would even eat the bugs they were brought in for. Almost no research was done on their food preferences, and in the end, we have what we have. However, it should be said that not all biocontrol stories end in disaster. It's just that we hardly ever hear about the cases that went well, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. In the winter of 1888 to 1889, the Vidalia beetle, a ladybug species, was brought to California from Australia. The target was another introduced species, the insect, Iceria purchasii. It was damaging citrus groves so hard that farmers were uprooting and burning trees, and the value of the orchards was dropping fast. The situation looked hopeless. But by the fall of 1889, the pest was completely wiped out in the areas where it had been introduced. The Vidalia beetle literally saved California's citrus industry, and after its success there, the beetle started being sent to other regions, and the Vidalia helped there too. The story's seen as the beginning of classic biological control, and at the same time, one of the most successful programs in its history. There were a few other successful examples, but interestingly, they all involve insects and plants. Nothing like this exists with animals, well, or we just haven't found it. So if you know anything, don't hesitate to share it in the comments. Anyway, the point is, if someone seriously tried to release honey badgers in Florida, they'd need to do a thorough analysis, weigh all the risks, and the outcome would be the same. Scientists would be horrified and say right away, this is a bad idea. I can't argue with them. No, really, this idea would cost Florida's ecosystem way too much. And anyway, there's no such thing as fixing all the damage done to nature with just one magic pill or a magic honey badger. No animal could defeat Burmese pythons once and for all, not even humans. I've already mentioned that in Florida, there are whole groups of hunters who've dedicated their lives to catching invasive pythons. They get paid $50 for every snake under 4 feet, plus $25 for every extra 12 inches. Spotting an active nest can earn you a whopping $200. But hunting alone won't fix the problem. For an ecosystem to get rid of an invasive species, you need a full-on approach: education, policy, and the latest scientific know-how. Even today, new technologies are being developed to track and catch pythons. Much has been accomplished, and we should keep raising awareness about the threat these snakes pose, so Burmese pythons aren't let loose in the wild, and pet snakes are chipped and monitored more carefully. In short, this is a massive job that needs everyone on board. Scientists, authorities, and regular Floridians, and definitely no honey badgers. Just imagine, honey badgers actually got introduced, released, they liked it, bred all over Florida, and became a new invasive species, harmful and dangerous. Then what? Getting rid of them would be impossible. You can't just bring in some other predator, even tougher, and you know why? Yeah, there's no one tougher than honey badgers. And that's not all. Honey badgers could end up costing not just Florida's ecosystem, but people too. For example, a farmer from the Emirates said that on his farm in Al Masali, Ras Al Khaimah, honey badgers killed and ate livestock worth around 80,000 dirhams, almost $22,000. In 2 years, at least 35 sheep died, and beehives were destroyed as well. In the end, the honey badger didn't get his name for nothing. Some chunks of meat that the predator ate cost 16,000 dirhams each, or about $4,000. The owner of the neighboring farm lost another 15 sheep. Together, they figured it was the work of the same honey badger. The tracks matched, and the wounds on the animals looked the same. In the end, the farmer set up baited cage traps and actually caught the thief. In the video, the captured animal sits in the cage, growling and baring its teeth. Pretty impressive. But you've probably already realized that with a honey badger, it's not just about appetite, but also about cunning. A few years ago, a wildlife conservationist from Kruger National Park, Brian Jones, rescued a honey badger named Stoffel. And that's when it all began. Stoffel turned out to be an escape artist. As soon as he was locked up, he'd climb the fence, stick his paw through the mesh, and undo the lock. When that stopped working, he started digging tunnels, just like in the movie, The Great Escape. Then Jones built a honey badger Alcatraz, as the BBC called it, a fenced-off area that the honey badger theoretically couldn't get out of. But Jones didn't account for the fact that there were trees in the enclosure, and where there are trees, there are branches. And the animal didn't hesitate. First, it dragged a branch and used it as a ladder. When the branches were taken away, it stacked up stones and used them as steps. In the movie Honey Badgers, Masters of Mayhem, Jones talks about how Stoffel would break into his house, attack other animals at the rehab center, and time and again find a way to outsmart the barriers. And this is something important to keep in mind too. The honey badger is so clever that keeping it away from sheep, chickens, or even dogs would be really tough. Catching one? Even harder. The damage it could cause is huge. Eventually, it won't just be environmentalists opposing honey badgers in Florida, but also local farmers dealing with a new invasive predator. And honestly, have you seen this? Yeah, they're better off staying in their Africa, far away from people. Don't forget to hit the like button if you haven't already. See you later.